Welcome to the My Tech Toolbelt podcast. We're your hosts. I'm Shannon.
And I'm Brenda. And this is a podcast where we highlight educators who innovate, engage, and inspire through the use of technology. Welcome to episode 26 of the My Tech Toolbelt podcast. Looking for a way to have enhanced or alternative resources for your curriculum? Well, you are in for a treat as we speak today with Kristina Ishmael from New America, where we talk about open educational resources, or OER. OER are teaching and learning materials that you may freely use and reuse without charge. Kristina explains what type of resources are available, licensing issues, and how you can use the resources once you have them. Kristina's enthusiasm about OER will have you so excited to see how you can use OER at your school. So, without further ado, our interview with Kristina Ishmael.
Today we are so excited. We've been laughing for probably 15 minutes pre-recording here with a good friend of ours, Kristina Ishmael. Hey, Kristina.
Hello. How are you all?
Welcome.
We're great. Welcome. Thanks for being on our show today. Kristina is going to be talking to us today about her work nationally on open educational resources, OER. And so to just kick us off, first of all, I'm going to say that you're one of my favorite people that I've really ever worked with, and we laugh so hard when we're together. It makes me cry. And I really
cry to start off. We're not gonna. It's like all downhill from there. Then.
I love the work that you're doing. We met at Q Bold a while back, and from there we've kind of reconnected at just different conferences. And I love the passion that you have for open educational resources and just the work and how it really impacts teachers. And today, I'm super excited to share that work with all of our listeners. So thanks for being with us. And to just kick us off, Kristina, tell us a little bit of kind of about your journey to where you are now and how you started.
So I'll give you the current job, and then I'm going to backwards plan you and walk you through where I actually started. So my new fancy job title as of December 31st, 2018 is Senior Project Manager of the Learning Technologies Project on the Education Policy Program at New America. Not a long title at all.
No. Do you need, how many business cards do you need to put that title on there? Do you it's like an unfolding one?
I'm pretty sure that it needs 2 semicolons. So, I mean, it's a fancy way of saying that I get to lead this amazing project around open educational resources and helping school districts, educators, state departments of education look at the role that instructional materials play in the classroom and in teaching and learning in general, because it's not just with students, it's also with teachers around professional learning. And so that all kind of stemmed from my time in the classroom. I started out in business and mass communications and had no interest in education whatsoever. And I ended up moving to Omaha, Nebraska, and I started teaching preschool. And I was a co-teacher in a 3 and 4-year-old classroom, and it was inquiry-based for little. So it was really driven by their natural curiosity, which I love. And so we would pull together resources whenever they would kind of guide what was happening. We would give that overarching theme, but then we would try to find the resources along the way. And so I, of course, tapped into online resources right away, just coming from kind of the world of school and being able to tap into those resources. And then I started to go back to school for elementary and early childhood education. I student taught in 2nd grade. And then my first teaching job was in Omaha Public Schools in South Omaha in a school of pre-K through 4th grade. I was hired as the 7th kindergarten teacher late in the summer. And I walked in and I had nothing in a classroom.
Wow.
Because it was a brand new kindergarten classroom. They didn't have my centers. They didn't have any sort of materials. They didn't have any sort of the curriculum that the district issued, any of that. And I was kind of left there for a little bit. I ended up getting to purchase everything, of course. But then that day when the district person came in and dropped off the district issued curriculum in the shrink wrap, and I was like, oh, okay, this is what I teach from. All right, cool. Except in South Omaha, it's largely Latino. And the majority of my students came into me into my classroom speaking no English. And that district issued curriculum was not going to help me.
No.
So I grew up in Phoenix, Arizona, and fortunately I speak Spanish. And so I was able to communicate with a lot of my students. However, it was not enough. And so I spent, like many teachers, hours, countless hours on weeknights and weekends and trying to find those additional resources that I knew could help my students. And not only just looking for the resources, but also trying to customize it for them and saying, okay, I know this student here comes from El Salvador, and I want to make sure that they have that natural connection, but now to see themselves here in Omaha, Nebraska. And I know that this student comes from Mexico City, and then I can do that. So I spent a lot of time doing that, again, as many teachers do. Then my second year, I moved into a dual language program, and I taught second grade Spanish. And that was a long year, speaking in my second language. And teaching in my second language. But it was also, it was a great year. If you're familiar with word walls in a classroom, when you are teaching students specific vocabulary, I had my own word wall that I would learn specific kind of slang words or even just vocabulary words that I didn't necessarily know. My favorite word was pesqueros, which are like capris. And the kids loved that I didn't know the word capri because we talked about clothing in second grade and weather, and that was part of our science unit. And so it was really fun. And again, found myself looking for resources because the district had issued, it was the same curriculum that we had used on the English side, but we had the Spanish version and they had very limited resources that came with it. So if you think of your traditional kind of accompanying resources or supplemental resources, the consumable books for spelling and grammar and all of those things, it's actually more limited when you're teaching in Spanish. And so there was a lot of searching for additional resources for that. Fast forward, I went back into a regular second grade classroom, was doing the same thing, looking for additional resources. I ended up moving districts to a smaller district in Omaha, Ralston Public Schools, and I was an ELL teacher, 1st through 6th grade. And I walked in and there was a hodgepodge of materials, some from the late 80s,
Wow.
some from, the early 2000s. And this was 2011 at that point. And I'm kind of like, all right, cool. I had newcomers that had just come to me from Togo, West Africa. 3 of them that all spoke different tribal languages and could not speak to one another. I had some kids that were from Myanmar and Burma. And so we had a lot of refugees just in general. And so
Amazing.
It was
in
trying
Nebraska.
to find, yeah, right? In Omaha, Nebraska.
Wow.
Yeah, fun fact. So Omaha Public Schools, my first district, recognizes 114 languages because Catholic Charities and Lutheran Family Services resettle a lot of families in Omaha, Nebraska. Yeah, it's amazing. It's amazing. They've got this amazing ELL population in Omaha and in Lincoln, actually just like 45 minutes away.
Would have never thought that.
Didn't know that.
I had no idea.
Yeah. So again, spent more time doing the resources. And this whole time, I'm a glutton for punishment. And I love to, not really, I love to learn. And so I just kept going to school and collecting degrees and different things. So I was working on my second master's when I was the ELL teacher. And it was in learning technologies through Pepperdine's program. And I did a statewide scan of professional learning that was or was not happening for tech integration. And it wasn't pretty. And built some kind of content around that. And there was a position that opened up at the state at that point, and it was the digital learning specialist. And it was a brand new position. And so it was kind of like, you can come create this position. So I was like, yes, sign me up. So I actually took that position mid-year, but they let me fulfill my contract. So I was able to finish my last year in the classroom with my kids. And then 3 weeks later, I started at the state and I was there for 4 years. And so my role was really 50% kind of internal and training my own state level staff on how to integrate technology, think about that in teaching and learning, as well as federal programs and how we can pull that into Title I. And then the other half of that job, or the other 50%, was working across the entire state of Nebraska. So if you're not familiar with that, it's dead center in the country. And to travel across that, like I normally would do about once a quarter, it is anywhere from 8 to 10 hours. So it's a large state as far as regions, but there were 310,000 students that I was like the sole ed tech person for.
Wow.
And at the state level, let's be clear, there were other people that were helping, at the more local and regional level, but at the state level, that was a pretty big commitment.
Yeah.
I also became the school library liaison when I was there. So Nebraska is very fortunate in that for school accreditation purposes, they require a full-time school librarian for every 250 students. Because of that, that means that you've got folks that are in these buildings that are amazing and trained at the curation of resources. And yet there was no one to advocate for them at the state level. And so I started down the library science pathway before I decided to go more ed tech specific. And so I felt like I could kind of represent the school librarian. And for some reason, that then meant that I knew everything about copyright, fair use, and Creative Commons. Woo!
And you do. I feel like you do. You're one of my go-tos.
I know a lot, but I certainly am not an intellectual property lawyer by any means. And so I became the person that people went to for that kind of stuff and did a lot of professional learning across the state on that, including going into schools and leading different sessions, particularly in the library with students. And they're like, oh gosh, who wants to learn about copyright? Sweet. This sounds awesome. But people started to kind of affiliate me with that skill set. And then I had a friend of mine who contacted me in January 2016 and has always challenged me professionally and said, what's next for you? And I said, I don't know. I really like my job. Why? He's like, yep, I just recommended you for a fellowship at the U.S. Department of Ed. What?
Wow.
Hold on. That's like in Washington, D.C.
That's exactly what I said. I was like, in D.C.?
Because right now I'm in Nebraska.
Right. Yep. You do know that. Okay, cool. Okay. And I had my first interview a week later, second interview the week after that. And then I was offered the position by the end of February. Wow. And it was to lead the project Go Open, which is all about supporting schools and states as they kind of transition away from traditional textbooks to the use of OER. And so fortunately, I had kind of that experience from the classroom to the state level and really understanding copyright and fair use and in Creative Commons to, certainly dwell upon for leading such a project. When I moved out to DC, so I started in April 2016, and I knew that I was going to be there for a full year and I would bridge administrations. Andrew Marcinick, who was the first person to lead Go Open, we overlapped for a couple months. And so he could kind of onboard me. And I specifically worked with states because I had previous relationships with all of my state folks. So I worked with them, and then he transitioned out in June, and then I took on the project. And so when I came on board in April of 2016, we had 40 districts that had committed to Go Open, meaning that they had committed to replace one textbook in one grade level and content area for the use of OER. And then we supported through kind of this mentoring and this network of districts that were doing this work. And then we also had 14 state departments of education that had committed to doing this from the state level and providing a repository and professional learning. And then they joined their own kind of community of practice with other states to share things. And so by the end of my time there in 2017, we had grown that to 110 districts and 20 states. And there were many other kind of districts that were on the periphery that wanted to be a part of things, but couldn't necessarily sign on for various reasons. And the same thing with the states. So we knew that we had other states that were interested and involved with some of this work. For a lot of times it was for political reasons because it required certain kind of protocols with press releases and things like that at the state level, but they're all kind of still a part of this overarching network. So the Hewlett Foundation has funded a lot of work in OER, and they funded me to go over to New America to kind of incubate the project and figure out next steps. We had this great project. We had this great network of districts that were doing some of this work. We knew that there were additional things like professional learning and considerations for sustainability that we needed to think about. And so they funded me to go over to New America for 18 months as a fellow and think about that and start to build some natural kind of partnerships with other nonprofits and researchers in different districts and start to tell that story. And so that's when my job kind of shifted to thinking about it from the professional learning aspect, getting out on the road, building awareness around this, because unlike textbooks and publishing companies, OER doesn't have a marketing budget. Mm-hmm. And so it's a lot of word of mouth and building awareness that way. And while I have a big one, not a mouth that is, it's only me. And so it's still trying to get the message out there and make sure that people know what OER is, that it's different than just saying free resources that you find online, and what that means for us for the purposes of teaching and learning. Moving forward for this new position, I promise it's coming full circle. Moving forward for this new position, Hewlett has been really happy with the work that's happening. And so we released a project site that we'll make sure to include in the resources that we share with everyone. We released this project site in April of 2018, so just last year. It continues to have really good page views, like the analytics behind it. So we're reaching new stakeholders by having this project site. So we're making sure that classroom teachers, school librarians, folks that may not necessarily know about New America as a policy shop or a think tank in DC speak, know about this work that we're doing, and then kind of moving that forward. We also have some partnerships with folks like ISTE, where we release some publications around OER and the selection of instructional materials. We have a relationship with the U.S. Department of Education and my former office there, supporting Go Open and continuing to do some of that work. And so moving forward, that's what we'll continue to do, is continue to build awareness, trying to move kind of OER out of this niche market, and that folks really start to have those questions around how instructional materials can help us rethink teaching and learning and what's actually happening in the classroom. There it is.
Wow. Can I just say, like, I want to be you when I grow up? Like, holy mackerel. Like, and this all happened like in
like 5 years.
In a span of time that is like, I mean, I'm tired just listening to you. and I know your travel schedule.
Yeah, it's not slowing down.
No. And now who's your team at New America? I mean, you must have like a support team there.
It's small. It's a wee team. So the education policy program at New America is actually one of the largest teams there. New America is all about the renewal of America in a digital age. So we have teams that work on everything from open technologies, cybersecurity, things like that, to political reform. And then you have education policy that, I mean, obviously education is kind of important in the US. And so we have different teams within the education policy program. So we have everything from early learning all the way up to higher ed and college and career, kind of beyond that. And so we have a dual language program. We also have our learning technologies program. So it is led by Lisa Guernsey, who has some vast experience, I would say, in media literacy and understanding the role of technology on young learners. She has written a book, Tap, Click, Read, if you're not familiar with that. So she wrote that with the Cooney Center. And so they were able to kind of identify and address some of the fears and the concerns that folks may have around putting technology in the hands of young learners. And then our new program associate, Sabia Prescott. So she just kind of came on after my former colleague, Lindsay, left for the Hill, where she is now working as a fellow with the HELP committee, specifically focusing on education. That's great. So it's just the three of us that talk about OER and learning technologies. And we've got some other work around learning sciences. And so, yeah, it's three of us.
Wow.
Wow. That's a lot for like the United States of America.
Sure.
Education.
I mean,
but if you can do Nebraska.
You're right. 310,000 students is just the launch pad.
Yeah. It's phenomenal that the trajectory of your career and the amazing opportunities and work that you've been able to do in such a short amount of time.
So can
crazy.
You like explain what constitutes or what is OER and what is in that bubble?
Yeah, because I don't know that people really know.
Absolutely. So usually we kind of bucket the different types of instructional materials. So we have everything that's copyrighted or proprietary that we typically pay for. Then you have things that are free. So those are the things that we find online and we pull from anything from Pinterest, Teachers Pay Teachers, different teacher blogs, you name it. It's free, but there still is technically a copyright that's actually attached to those free resources. And then if you look at something that's open, that means that it has a license that's actually affixed to it, typically a Creative Commons license that allows you the 5 R's. So this is from Dr. David Wiley, and I have a tendency to always put my hand up in like my big high five. And so Dr. David Wiley out of from BYU and Lumen Learning helped identify the 5 R's around these types of the resources and what you can do with them, provided the resource has a license. So I can reuse them. Simply means I get to reuse it and I don't have to ask for permission. I can revise it. So I can customize the actual resource. That can range as far as what it is. So that could mean something that was created by a teacher in California that I take and I customize or localize for one of my students in Omaha, because different context. Let's be real, different context. And if you're familiar with how textbooks are typically written, they're written for California, Texas, New York, and Florida. So that is not obviously comprehensive enough to cover all the states that they're missing in there. And so that's the opportunity for us to customize or localize it. That also allows us translation. So I didn't recognize this. And this is something that I learned probably just a couple of years ago, that I didn't realize translating copyrighted content is actually an infringement of the copyright. And so when I spent time translating English materials for my Spanish speaking students, when I taught in the dual language program, it's considered fair use within the four walls of my classroom. So let's be clear there. It's considered fair use because I'm using it for educational purposes. I'm good. It's when I started to put things up online and publicly facing that I would have run into issues. And so the translation of materials, we're all trying to figure out how to best serve ELs across the country and providing as many resources as possible to them in their heritage language. And that's hard to do. So making sure that something that happens to be openly licensed can be translated and we don't have to worry about that copyright infringement. Remixing something means I get to take things, and I think of it as an app smash, where I get to take elements of different pieces. So a different photo here, a video here, from a lesson plan here, from an idea here, and mix it and mash it up and make it into something that I would use. So that's a remix. Retain something, I simply get to keep it. I don't have to worry about a license every year. So it's in perpetuity that I get to retain something. And the last thing is redistribute. It is all about sharing. And I know that when I first met Shannon, I did the Care Bear stare, because I do believe that education is about sharing and sharing is caring. But that's really what that redistribution is all about. So that if I did customize something for my students in Omaha, then my counterparts in Florida could then pick it up and then customize it for them. But then they push it back out to the community. So it's very crowdsourced and organic in that nature. But it's also really cool to see the things that teachers are creating in different parts of the world. And it is not just national. I do all of my work very US focused, but it's important to note that Hewlett's work and UNESCO, it's actually, especially when you think of developing countries and trying to get opportunities and instructional materials in the hands of students.
So cool.
So Kristina, can you give us some examples of what teachers can use in OER as a resource for them?
Absolutely. Yeah, so it really ranges, and it kind of depends on what you're even looking for. So fortunately, because there has been awareness been built over the past couple of years with things like Go Open and just other organizations that have really tried to increase the overall kind of marketing of OER, there are more resources than there were certainly even 3 years ago. And so I would say one of the first places to start, so if you're a teacher and you're looking for supplemental resources, so let's say you have to use your district issued curriculum, you're kind of stuck with that, and that's fine. But then you know that you're going to find additional resources to supplement certain lessons to make sure that kids really master a certain standard. So you can pull in a variety of whole group and small group lessons. There may be assessments that are out there. There may be additional activities and lesson plans that are geared towards a certain standard. You can also go more granular than even that, which is like media. So you could pull video and images that have Creative Commons licenses. And then you kind of you pull back a little bit. So then you have districts that are starting to do this, and they're curating these resources with like a district team. And they're starting to pull these all together so that these are kind of not necessarily given to teachers, but that they're certainly put together in a more comprehensive package. And so then you have a comprehensive module that may be created for a specific standard. So when I taught second grade, when we did our geometry unit and we were looking at fractions, that I would pull together different resources and have a pre-assessment to see where all the kids were. I had whole group, small group instruction, different activities and lesson plans. I had additional resources for my gifted and talented students that had already mastered the standard and they were able to kind of go on and do some additional enrichment. I had additional resources for my ELs and my special education students, any of my struggling students that I could pull into smaller kind of intervention groups or reteach. And then, of course, we had our post-assessment or our quick formative to make sure that they had mastered the standard. And then even a summative, there may be additional summative assessments that are out there as well. So that is kind of the districts are starting to look at that model and putting these all together in a comprehensive way. And then you zoom out even a little bit further and you have folks that have created full kind of comprehensive options that really do look like a textbook substitute. And they function very similar. Some of them have been reviewed by third-party reviewers like EdReports, and it's reviewed as a traditional series or a traditional curriculum, but it just happens to be openly licensed. For example, illustrative mathematics is a full 6-8 math curriculum, and it received all green lights in EdReports, which is the highest that you can receive.
Wow.
And then in the 4 different kind of areas that they look. And they also looked at EL Education, which is a K-5 English language arts series, also received all green lights. And so we know that there is quality content that really functions as, some folks are calling it turnkey, some are calling it comprehensive, whatever, however you want to look at it. It functions exactly like the kind of curriculum that folks are most used to, but it just happens to be openly licensed. So that gives us greater flexibility, even at the district level, down to the building, down to the classroom level, where I can still customize it for the students that I would be working with.
And so
Wow.
I know that it's mind-blowing. Is there someone reviewing these as far as content goes?
Great question. So yes and no. The full comprehensive curricula are largely reviewed by folks like EdReports. The Louisiana Department of Education also has a review process, and they are very open and transparent about their reviews. And so their rubrics are available on their website. And then when you get into more of the modules at the district level, you have district teams that are doing that review. And then when you get back down to the granular level, as far as lesson plans and things like that, that's where it's really reliant upon the community. And this is where a lot of folks push back a little bit around, well, this person contributed it and it may not be high quality. This person did this, whatever. Unfortunately, this is also where the publishing companies step in and they say, well, you can't guarantee that it's high quality. I can't necessarily guarantee that the textbooks that are in the classroom are high quality either.
Right.
And when they say it's standards aligned, I don't know if you're familiar with how they did that, but a lot of textbooks all of a sudden just had a Common Core sticker slapped on the front with no revisions or anything like that. Mm-hmm. And it's because they can point to page 234, paragraph 5, where the one sentence says the same language in that standard indicator, and all of a sudden it's standards aligned. And that's difficult because that's not actually addressing the standard at all. And then we know that there are errors and typos in textbooks as well, and that's fine. But the thing about OER is that if I find that, then I can update it, revise it, and, kind of fix it from there. So yeah, district leaders, when they ask about the quality thing, I think there are 2 conversations around there. So there's high quality and there's also standards aligned, and those often get pushed together. And so, yes, I can have a standards aligned worksheet, but it's still a worksheet. It's not high quality. And so it's not something that I want to put in the hands of my students necessarily. And so that's something that I have to really consider in that. And I also I trust teachers. I don't know if you've been in a classroom recently, but teachers are amazing. Teachers are instructional designers. They are creators. If you haven't been in a classroom and you think that teachers don't create, well, I'm sorry, go into a classroom and see what they're doing.
Right.
Because they do, and they know their standards and they know their content. And if they don't, this gives them a great opportunity to dig in a little bit more and really kind of unpack those standards to make sure that it's something that is happening, that they're addressing with their students. So I can't guarantee that the things that we pull from Pinterest and Teachers Pay Teachers are high quality either, but those seem to just get they fly under the radar and aren't even considered. And so I don't know. It's relying upon the community. I'm going to go back to that.
Yeah. Well, and I think, having kind of the Louisiana Department of Ed and the EdReports kind of back some of the bigger pieces of this, I think is huge, because they're not just looking at OER, right? They're kind of looking at everything.
Not at all. They're looking at everything.
And I think there are cases that could be made of where an OER reviewed piece of material is actually higher quality and standards aligned than something that is from a publishing company. And that's not to dish publishing companies, but
and more up to date.
And the fact that what I love is I've switched from kind of buying books, actual physical print books, to buying more Kindle books, because I love when that email comes and it says, "Oh, your Kindle book by Sylvia Duckworth has been updated." And I'm like, "Oh, there's new stuff in there." And I click update on my Kindle so that I can see what the content is. And it's live, it's dynamic. When there is a new edition and I've got a digital book, it's live. And I feel like that's kind of how OER is that if there is something relevant to today that needs to be updated immediately for, relevancy purposes, those things can happen very organically and dynamically in an OER type of a setting.
And then not that long ago, it became very obvious that there were school districts out there using textbooks that were how old?
Over 40 years old.
That is ridiculous.
I can tell you that.
Yeah, it does. There are things happening on such a fast pace now. And we think about that. It's hard for us to handle as adults, I think, a lot of times and filter that information. But think about that within the context of history and even science for that matter.
Yeah, right.
Whenever I first got started at the department, we knew that the solar eclipse was going to happen. And so how long is that? I bet you that it's still not in textbooks right now, unless it was published within the past, year, I guess. As far as when that happened in August of 2017, how long does it take for it to actually get put into print?
Right.
And so it's not just current events and history, it's things like science and new discoveries that could potentially be impacted by that too.
And science is happening right now. I mean, we have direct uplinks to the men and women on the International Space Station. I mean, and they're doing experiments live for kids to watch. Like, that's the power of having, I think, kind of these open resources. And I know NASA's doing some stuff, as I recall, with open resources. And I don't know. I'm a big fan. Well, and also I work in, I know, I'm like, are you hiring? No, I'm one of these people that because I work in Catholic education and Catholic schools, there's no money to buy textbooks, which is why we go into a lot of these schools and either A, they don't have any because the principal was savvy enough to be like, ditch them. They're so old, they're irrelevant.
Yep.
Or B, they're still using those textbooks that are literally falling apart and they're duct taped together. And the reason you have to put a cover on them is because the whole thing will fall off if you don't. And why? Like, why when there is these other materials out there that you could use for free or low cost, right?
Low cost. Yeah, no, I think I'm glad that you mentioned that because yes, they're designed to be free. However, there is a cost if you're going to print something, of course. Usually when working at the district level, I'm adamant about compensating teachers for the work that they would do in pulling that all together, curating the resources, vetting the resources, whatever else. So instead of the check that you would write to the publishing companies for your traditional materials, you're going to reinvest that back into the district. And you're going to invest that into your teachers through professional learning, through the time that they're spending on this whole process. There is a cost. It's not something like where we're just going to cross that out of our budget or that line item, because that's not what happens by any means. Right. And I have a lot of district leaders that are like, no. We need to make sure that people know that. We're just reallocating. Yeah, absolutely.
I know that when we talked, you had there was a district here in California that was working on curating some science curriculum, and I think was it Oxnard School District?
Oxnard has done some great work. Grossmont Union High School District in San Diego has also done some great work. Yeah, there's actually quite a few districts in California that are doing cool things with OER. Vista was a part of kind of an interstate project where they were working with a couple of districts in Ohio and Wisconsin for 7th and 8th grade social studies. And they didn't have a textbook that would help with that. So they ended up relying on OER. The work that Dan McDowell and his team at Grossmont have done on their science is phenomenal. And they're moving into different content areas now. The fact that their Board of Education approved the work that they had curated and created for their 3 different science courses back it was spring of last year, and they're implementing this year says a lot. It's really cool.
Well, and that's the beauty of a district who trusts their educators, right? Like you are the experts.
Yeah.
That's why we hired you.
That's why we hired you, right? So we're not like saying, oh, well, we hired you, but you're just going to facilitate this textbook curriculum. These people spent a year or 2, right, going out and curating this content. They beta tested it in their own classrooms. They met regularly. They synthesized. They got rid of things. They And then they took it and presented it to this board of experts, and it was approved to go. And that's exciting.
Right? It is exciting. And that's, I'm in the middle of writing a course right now all about OER. And if you're familiar with the production or kind of the design and production of online courses or e-learning, you have a SME, a subject matter expert, and an ID, an instructional designer. And they have a very tight relationship as they bring the content knowledge and then the actual engagement and the learning sciences and how to put these two things together. And I think of that in the terms of teachers. We're all SMEs. Mm-hmm. I think elementary teachers, I know that people may disagree with this, but it's actually harder as an elementary teacher because you have to know all of the content area.
Yeah. No, I agree.
So it's not focusing on, I teach science. It's, I teach everything. Yeah. I just happen to teach it with little kids, and that's cool. And that's where my heart is. But I think it's really important to own that expertise. I have a hard time even saying that I'm an expert in X, Y, and Z. I do, but I think it's something that we need to get a little more comfortable with as well.
Well, and I think, these are people that went to school to study education and, the curriculum design and, whatever else they got their, these master's degrees in. And it's like, that's why you hired me. Let me do this. And, that's not to say there's not an occasional kind of bummer out there, but at the end of the day, there's bummers everywhere. Like, in every career field, all the way across everything, you're going to come across people who just, don't execute. But for the most part, we need to kind of put education back into the hands of the experts and not the administrators, and let the administration kind of turn that power over and say, okay, show me what you got. And that's where the magic happens, I think.
Absolutely. That requires a culture of trust. Mm-hmm. And that is something that is very difficult for district leaders to really wrap their heads around. That we talk about mindset and we talk about learning from failure and all of the different buzzwords that are really popular in education right now. But it's a culture of trust too, that we have to make sure that they have the foundation, that they feel that they can make those mistakes, but also be trusted as the professionals that they are to do this work. And it's not fidelity to a curriculum. It's not fidelity to my new textbook. It's fidelity to the standards. And then we find the resources that help kids master those standards.
If we don't, boy, we're in big trouble.
Right.
we've got to step up our educational game and really make sure that these kids understand how to think and how to learn and how to inquire, how to ask questions. And that's the thing. Okay. So open educational resources are rad.
Thanks.
We've established that.
I think so.
And so for teachers out there who, have kind of maybe typically gone to a teachers pay teachers to find things, and there's nothing wrong with that. But I want to say, I typically tell my students, hey, there's other stuff out there. Why don't you go explore something beyond? I mean, if you're especially, first of all, we know teachers don't make enough money, and Catholic school teachers make even less.
Sure.
So let's
don't spend your hard-earned money on that.
Yeah.
Keep going.
And homeschool educators.
Oh my gosh. Yes, absolutely.
Right. This is a place where, and I get it, teachers pay teachers. The teachers are trying to supplement their income that they don't make, but then you're making it on the backs of people who also don't have any money. And that's where I kind of get a little, so I'm not against
it. Sharing is sharing. I'm going to do my share again.
That's right. I'm with you. So I want to think, like, where would we start? So I'm a fifth grade teacher in California, and I'm teaching I'm teaching United States history, right? So that's fifth grade standard. And I say that because my son, he's in every episode. He likes to listen to when I talk about him. So my son's in fifth grade, and we are working on his state report. Let's say if I was his teacher was listening to this podcast, where could I send her to get some resources? Like, where would be the place where we'd say, start here?
So fortunately, I no longer work for the federal government. and I can actually tell you about some of these places. No, I spent probably the first 3 months just digging into a variety of places where the districts that I've been working with told me that they were finding resources. So not only the ones that I knew previously for kind of media in the work that I did around copyright, fair use, and Creative Commons, but also where are those additional resources like lesson plans and like activities and full modules and interactives and simulations and all of those things. So I spent a good chunk of time doing that and then started a list. I curated my own list and I kept notes. And we put that out as a resource that you all will have a link to. And it's on my project site and it's resources to get started. And so I highly recommend starting there just because they are resources that have been sent to me by folks in the field that are doing this work or ones that I have found and just continue to add to. There are new ones. In fact, over the holidays, there's a brand new one that thank you, San Francisco Unified School District. There's a new one that I need to add because they have openly licensed their math curriculum for K-8.
Wow.
And they've been working with Creative Commons over the past year or two to make sure that the licensing was going to work for them. And we all got an email as part of kind of an OER listserv. And they're like, hey, here it is, K-8 math. And it's all openly licensed.
Wow.
So it's being able to identify those and kind of that ongoing development and adding that to this list of resources. I would not necessarily shy away from using search engines like Google. There are ways to filter your search as well. So if that's someplace that you would like to start instead, feel free. But it's nice to know that you have places like this project site that can identify certain resources. There's also specific repositories to look for OER. So OERcommons.org is one that I highly recommend. And then the other one is through the Illinois Department of Education. They have something called IOER. It's the Illinois OER kind of repository that they started a few years ago. And we're having more conversations with California Department of Ed and the one that they had for a while, my digital chalkboard, and kind of seeing if there's going to be some new life breathed into that. So we'll see. I think that's more info to kind of keep on your radar and see what comes of that.
That's great, because I know, just as an educator, the first place I go is Google, right? And I go to Google and I'll be like, hey, I'm doing this, show me what's out there. And what scares me is that I don't really know what the license is. If I just kind of find it on someone's blog, or unless I find it in one of these spaces, the OER Commons, or if a teacher is savvy enough to be like, it's here, but it's on Teachers Pay Teachers. And once you pay me, then you can use it. We've had a couple of people tell us they've put resources for free on Teachers Pay Teachers, but it's free on Teachers Pay Teachers. So that they just have a way to distribute it that's not, and they can kind of keep track of how much traction they're getting on it and things like that. And I thought, that's interesting. I've never...
And it's easier than having it on your website and trying to maintain
and trying to get it out that way.
Yeah. But again, I
can see that.
I don't know whether that person actually knew or borrowed something, and I you don't know if it's like, oh, that's a graphic I've seen before. I don't.
Well, and it's hard when you look at things like graphic organizers. It's really hard to copyright a graphic organizer.
Right.
And some of those additional kind of instructional aids and things that we use on a regular basis that we're not really sure where it came from.
Right.
But there are ways, this is the whole other thing, and it's not to scare people by any means. People are paying attention to things that are copyrighted now, way more than they ever did.
Right.
And even something as simple as a reverse Google image search can tell me a lot. I know that Shannon found a photo of me recently, and
this morning.
And I have an entire album of openly licensed stock photos that are out there. And so all I have to do is take one of those photos and drop it into Google image search, and it'll pull up every website where that photo is. And so that's very common for any sort of creators that want to see where their content is online, and whether that's an image or video or even a worksheet that may be coming from a publishing company and has been repurposed and given the cute fonts and some cute additional graphics that may be put up on Teachers Pay Teachers. They're really starting to pay attention to that now.
But also it's respectful to give the credit to where credit is due. And none of us want, I hope not, none of us want to be stealing someone else's work. So if it's up there and you need to be paying for it, then pay for it. And if it's up there and you're like me, who's like, yeah, take it. You know, just give me credit for it. Like, at least put my name on there so that somebody can say, oh, that's cool. And whether I want it to be remixed or repurposed or revised, I may not want that image to be revised because it's part of a dissertation or it's part of a book that we're writing or something like that. So pay attention to the licensing that comes with a lot of these things, I think, is you can use it for free, but you got to give me credit and don't change it.
Can't change it.
Yeah.
And those licenses you can get from the Creative Commons website.
Yeah, just go to creativecommons.org and they have a little kind of toolkit that will walk you through what you want people to be able to do with whatever you've created. And then it automatically generates the license for you with the logo, like the actual symbol that you can use, as well as the HTML iframe and all of that stuff if you want to be able to put it digital and you want to add that to a website or anything like that.
And so I think there's a couple buckets, and you mentioned, you kind of mentioned this in the beginning, but I think there's like curriculum, like a full curriculum that is OER. Yep. And then there's materials. You can parcel it out, right? Like different resources and things like that. So as a teacher, if you're at a school or that has like no textbooks, you would want to be looking for a curriculum, most likely, unless you want to pull all the different resources together
yourself
and put it together yourself. And is there a preference for one over the other? Or if I was looking for a curriculum for a school, let's say, that didn't have anything, let's say we're getting rid of math textbooks next year. I had a school that told me that. I would say, if you were going to look for curriculum, go here. Where would they go to find that?
So I would point them back to the project site because we have a filterable search. So you can search by grade level, content area, and then kind of see what is out there. So I think it starts with a scan of seeing what's out there. And so if you feel like you have the capacity to go out and curate and create from scratch, do it, because there is a greater sense of ownership in that process. However, if it is something that you want to find that could function in the place of a textbook instead of purchasing one, go out there and pull one of those that has already been reviewed and see if that's something that could be helpful. There's also kind of that in between, which you have your full series and your curriculum, like for a specific content area, you have your individual materials, but then there's that one where the districts have been doing that. They've curated and they've created like those modules or the full units. And those are also being shared. So I think of Liberty Public Schools in Liberty, Missouri, just north of Kansas City. 3 years ago, they had 0 courses with any OER, like 0, none whatsoever. Now, after they have scaled and they tried things, they scaled, they learned, they've gotten all sorts of teachers interested in this. They are doing K-5 math right now, and they're using Eureka Math, which is another OER series.
I was just going to ask about that. I'm glad you brought that up.
Yeah. So they're using that in their K-5 buildings now. And then they've had folks that have gone through and curated full, 7th and 8th grade history. And so now they're over, I think they said almost 50 courses 3 years later that they're doing this. And so they've had the investment from the district level and that they've been given options. So instead of buying the textbook, you get to spend that money as teachers and you get to decide how you're going to spend that money and allocate the funding. And so that happens too. So it's kind of that in between that you mentioned, like you've got the fully baked stuff and the comprehensive, you've got the districts that are sharing things like this. I know that Grossmont is also sharing the stuff that they created in science. And then you've got the more individual resources that exist on some of these repositories that you can go out there and find as well.
So I'm thinking, if I'm an administrator and I want to test this out in my school district, what do you think is the best way to just start and maybe try with a few teachers or like maybe one grade, or what do you suggest?
Baby steps.
Baby steps,
small.
Right.
Yeah, start small. So when I was at the department, we wrote the Go Open District launch packet, which was taking lessons learned and best practices from the ambassador districts, which were those that had already started to implement OER, and then were mentoring the newer districts that were getting started in the process. And they were also scaling up from there. And so we took lessons learned, best practices, different sort of insights from them and put it together in a launch packet, which was kind of broken down into 5 different phases that we saw districts typically work through in order to make this transition. Now, I think in the 3 years since it's been written, we could certainly, kind of bring that out and extrapolate and dive into certain phases more and potentially add, like 4 different more phases. But it really comes down to phase 5 was actually professional learning. And I think that could also come first around having these conversations and making sure that it doesn't feel like one more thing, because I don't want it to be one more thing, because everyone does some sort of curriculum adoption. And whether we're looking at the traditional textbooks or we're looking at something different, we have to start there, and we have to make sure that teachers have buy-in and that they want to do it. So if it's just being delivered to them and saying, you're going to do this, you're not going to get buy-in. And therefore, you're going to get resentment and all of that stuff right away. So I think that beyond other phases, I think it really does kind of start with that professional learning. But the 3 entry points that we had identified were when a textbook was up for adoption, so your traditional kind of process. When you looked and you did your scan and you saw that your series that you currently had may not be cutting it and you have gaps. So you know that certain units are lacking, that you could start to do some supplemental things. And then the other thing is when you have strong teacher leaders in a specific grade level or content area that just have that agency and that trust with the district, and that they could just run with trying something new and learning from that process. So the other phases, if I put them in order, phase 1 was really kind of doing that scan and seeing what's out there and putting together a team. Phase 2 was setting goals, identifying roles and responsibilities for everyone that's involved. We talk about kind of deep and wide as far as district team. We want the district leaders to be involved. We want curriculum directors. We want school librarians. We want specialists. We want classroom teachers. So we want anyone and everyone to be a part of this. We're not talking about a 50-person team, but we're talking about making sure that someone representative of kind of each of those levels is part of the team. And then you look at assessing your infrastructure. Is this going to be something that you print? Is this going to be digitally kind of pushed out there? You do not have to be a one-to-one district to use OER. And I think that's really important for people to understand. You can print, you can print, you can print. It is killing trees. It's okay. You can still print, because you don't have to have a device for every kid to be able to make this work. But you do have to remember that kids still have to be able to access it too. So if you are going to do things and you are a one-to-one district, you have to make sure that not only teachers but students can access the materials. So what is the mechanism that you will have to make sure that delivery happens? Phase 4 is vetting and making sure that there's that quality control kind of protocol put in place, whether that is taking the Achieve Equip rubric, which is specifically for OER, and revising, remixing for things that you want to look for at your specific district. Grossmont Union High School District did this, or certain look fors that you all identify as a team. Like, we're going to agree that this is what we're looking for. We think that this would be high quality if this, and this happens, and then we would put this all together. And then that final phase is the professional learning. And again, just making sure that it doesn't feel like one more thing, because we can't have that. We keep giving more things and not taking anything off of people's plates. And so we don't want it to feel like it's that one more thing.
Wow, great advice. Holy moly.
Wow.
I'm ready.
Administrators, listen up.
That's awesome.
That's a lot of work that you guys have kind of put into the thought process.
Yeah.
And the fact that you're just like reciting that off the top of your head right now.
She's
like, my brain
it's like she's done this before.
Yeah. Have you talked about this before?
I feel like I've done this.
I'm like taking notes as fast as I possibly can.
And I can't keep
like
up.
The 5 things. Everything's 5 things. 5 R's. 5 things administrators need to...
It's sticky. Yay!
Everything's 5. So cool. So cool. I mean, I'm a big fan. I'm not anti-textbook by any means, but we do have schools that have adopted the Eureka program and or kind of the Engage New York, which is an iteration of Eureka, right, for the New York. And some of the things I hear are, we have to print it because it's so dense, like we have to print it. And I was like, well, you don't have to, but you can. And I think when we talk about open educational resources, when we talk about what media are we talking about, it could be any media. It could be physical, like a PDF. It could be that.
Yep.
It could be a video. It could be an audio recording. It could be it could be photos. The media, the thing itself is kind of irrelevant. when it comes to what we're talking about and how it's licensed for reuse, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Although I do have to call something out. You mentioned PDF. PDF is locked and it's really, really hard to revise and remix.
Yes.
That would be my, one caveat right there. So if it's in an editable format.
Sorry. So not PDF.
People have still put a Creative Commons license on a PDF. That's great, as long as people can still get access to it. Yeah. Not everyone has the full Adobe suite to be able to go in and revise and remix it. So that's just something to be aware of that I would kind of throw in there.
I would imagine that that's why more people are using kind of the Google options for, I know when I've downloaded some shareable content, it tends to be like all in a Google Drive and it's all a Google Doc. And they just shared the whole Google Drive with me and you're like, oh, that's cool.
Yeah.
And, so that's I think where more of that stuff is going.
And that's what happened most recently with Boston Public Schools. So our early learning team at New America was in the process of writing a policy paper on the work that they've done in Boston Public Schools to create their own curriculum pre-K through second grade, specifically focused on kind of English language arts and inquiry-based. And so I wanted to put them on my list of resources. And so I sent an email. They contacted me right away. We had a meeting the next day and they're like, how did you know we were talking about licensing? I'm like, I didn't. And it just so happened that they were actually talking about licensing. And I said, I'd love to refer people to the content that you've created, but I've noticed that it's just available for free and not necessarily open. And they're like, well, tell us what that means. So by the end of the conversation, they said, no, that's what we want, is that we want people to take it and customize it, because it is very Boston centric, but they are working with preschools in Rhode Island and in Maine right now. And they've taken that and kind of customized it for their preschools. And so they're like, no, that's what we want. So they were able to put a Creative Commons license on their stuff. And now it's available to anyone that wants to use it, pre-K through second grade content. But some of the content, even in their Google Drive folder, some of the content are their actual PDFs. And so they talked about reworking that to make it more editable and so that people would be able to use it and kind of revise it and remix it from there. So it's just, we don't know kind of thing. And so that's why I'm here.
That's hey, keeps you employed, man, right? Out of trouble.
Security.
And she can read minds, which is amazing.
What? You should put that on your resume.
I recently added the Kevin Bacon of education to my Twitter profile after a friend of mine called me that at a conference. And so I think I'm just going to stick with that one right now. Yeah. Mind reader may be a little bit of a stretch.
Just a little, but not far. I mean, there are people that will swear by that. I had a question, because I'm thinking administratively and I'm putting on my logistics hat here, and I'm thinking like, okay, so let's say we've created something and we want to, like Boston, and we say, okay, we want to share it. And so we want to do that. But I know that I've created it and it's really in alignment and it's authentic. But once I put that kind of, you can do the 5 R's, you can reuse, revise, remix. Once they've revised it or remixed it, I can no longer kind of say it is still aligned with the standards that we had originally intended that they were aligned to. So it's kind of like you're kind of like releasing yourself of liability in a way when you do that, of like this, we can certify that if you're using it in this manner without we've remixed it, we can't guarantee that it's still in alignment with us. It may be in alignment for them. And they can certify that. But like there's kind of that.
Yeah, I think that goes back to that whole attribution, where if you are noting somewhere that you have revised and remixed it from somewhere else, that there's some sort of annotation down at the bottom of the website or wherever it may exist, that this was originally sourced from Boston Public Schools, revised, remixed by Omaha Public Schools, or whatever sort of school district or state level for that matter would want to use it. And then hopefully that they've done the due diligence of aligning it to their respective standards.
Yeah. I just get a little nervous.
No, Shannon, do not get nervous. I know. It's okay.
I do. But like, but I think it's all in, like you said, you have to turn this over to the teachers. You have to turn this over to the experts. And you're saying, if you're going to revise and remix this, that it is meeting the standards, the educational standards that you need it to meet in your classroom and to your student. And so in that case, okay. But I just don't want to like have, like it's attributed back to me personally. And then all of a sudden it's like,
Right.
it's been revised and remixed. And I'm like, well,
Right.
that doesn't look like anything.
No. I got that.
That's so cool. All right.
So any other pitfalls that we should be aware of or things to look out for if we're going to try to do this on our own?
Not you and I.
Not
Brenda and Shannon, but like just like teachers in general.
I'm a teacher and I'm like, I want to try searching. Is there anything I should be aware of?
So I mentioned you can certainly start at Google. I typically don't. And I would recommend starting from my list. I hate to keep promoting my own stuff. However, I would start from my list because it really can feel like searching for the needle in the haystack kind of situation. And I know that we've all gone down the rabbit hole of, we found this resource that linked to this, that we went here, and we can't even go back to the original source anymore.
Right.
So I would say try to start with some of these curated resources that we've identified that could certainly get you started. I would also go back to the caution of start small and baby steps, whether that's at the district level or in the classroom level. You can't expect to say, well, I'm no longer using my textbook. No, but I'm no longer using my textbook. And what am I going to do instead? So start small. Like think about, again, going back to my second grade geometry fraction unit. So think about that unit and knowing that's going to come up within the next few weeks. Start to prepare for that and start to do some cursory research and seeing what resources are available out there. And just that you would supplement what you currently have. Don't say, I'm not going to teach from the textbook that unit either. Supplement and see how it goes and test it out, because what worked for me may not work for you. And that's the beauty of all of this. It's also what kind of terrifies everyone. And that's okay too.
Right.
So we have to recognize that too.
So any other unusual items that are out there that you can bring into your classroom, foreign language or home economics or, just any?
Yeah. So interesting that you said that. The first school district in my own state, well, former state in Nebraska, Northwest Public Schools in Grand Island, Nebraska, dead center of the state. They decided to pursue, they signed on as a Go Open district and to pursue OER in health. There's not a lot of OER in health. So what they were able to do was start to develop, this is what I love about this too. They actually really leaned into community partners who provided resources for health, clinics, hospital, whatever it may be. And they pulled and curated the resources that were free, and then also got to then turn it into kind of a teachable moment to these partner organizations and saying, have you considered putting a Creative Commons license on this? And so they were able to find pre-existing open resources and then pull those in addition to the free, kind of build out their units that they would teach and scope and sequence that. Then they partnered with another school district 45 minutes east of them who also wanted to work in health. And so then they were able to kind of multiply the number of resources that they had because they had different community partners. And so they were able to do that. So I think there's going to be more non-core content area resources developed as more people get into this. And if I think of all of the CTE teachers out there that are creating their own content from scratch as it is, if we could all just put a Creative Commons license on it and share it, that would be really great and not reinvent the wheel. The same could be said for world languages too. There is an organization, I don't even know if they're an organization. They're a division at the University of Texas, Austin called CORAL. It's the Center for Open Educational Resources and Language Learning. So it's COERLL. And Sarah Sweeney is doing some really great work down there. And they're developing resources for language learning. So world languages. They have Spanish, they have Chinese, they have German, they have French, they have your main world languages that are being taught in a lot of our pre-K-12 schools. And so they're continuing to develop content. I was just on an amazing, amazing trip to Egypt over the holidays. And I happened to have one woman in my group who is a Chinese teacher from Chicago Public Schools. And you know how conversations go. Like, what do you do? What do you teach? I was fortunate enough that this group is actually tour group of educators. That's the whole tour group. They're specifically focused on educators. And so she was like, well, what do you teach? And I said, well, I used to teach and now I do this kind of work. And it's really hard to explain some of the work that I do, I think sometimes. And she was like, okay, cool. Like, I don't know if I fully understand. And so I said, let me show you. How about that? So I pulled up Coral's website, sitting on a bus in Luxor, Egypt. And I pulled up their website and we found Chinese resources that she was like, I can use these instead of buying a textbook next year. And I said, yes, you can. And the same could be said for Liberty Public Schools. They have a Chinese teacher that has now developed courses, Chinese 1, 2, and 3, and 4, I think actually, and put those out there with an open license. And she was flabbergasted. And so that is starting to happen more and more. And I love those moments so much.
Yeah, absolutely.
And these resources, I mean, Coral's obviously a place where things are curated. Your website that will be on our show notes and on our website is a place that's curating resources. But otherwise, if I've created something that I want to share that's been vetted or whatever, how would I get it out there? Like I just put it on, ShannonTebaldo'sResources.com. That doesn't exist, by the way. Don't go there. But but like, I mean, like,
I'm going to go buy that domain.
But you know what I mean? Like, how do we share? Because I think right now, the only way teachers know how to share is teachers pay teachers. And is there a better way or a different way?
Yeah. So I'm going to plug OER Commons again.
Okay.
I think that they've been in the OER space for over a decade now, which is saying a lot. I also love their entire team. Lisa Patrice and their team have done amazing work to continue to build awareness around OER and the professional learning that they offer. But also this repository is like the one place that people know how to not only search resources, but you can also contribute resources. Okay. And so that is where I would recommend folks do. Illinois has their repository. So they do focus specifically on Illinois teachers, but you can contribute your resources there. I know that my digital chalkboard, you can contribute resources. I believe you can still do that. But the cool thing I think about OER Commons is that a lot of the different states now have kind of their hubs. And so they have, I'm trying to think of who would have one. Michigan has one, for example. They have the Go Open Michigan work that they've done. So they've started to curate resources at the state level. And then they're providing that as a place where people can go and find it as a subset within the greater OER Commons. And so if I'm a Michigan specific teacher, I can go in there and contribute to OER Commons, but also make sure that that is within the Michigan content as well. And so you have a lot of states that are using OER Commons. And so I think more and more traffic will be coming there in general. Again, back to that conversation with Boston Public Schools, they have a website that they offer all of this up for free and now with an open license. And we talked about the advantages of putting this out there on another repository to continue to disseminate and get that out there further.
Got it. That's good, because that's where I would like to say, if there was someone who had created something,
right? Where
can they post it other than teachers pay teachers or something like that? So, and again, not that that's bad. That's a fine place to. And would somebody look at it? Would somebody look at it for and vet it when it's submitted to be posted there?
Great question. So it's relying on the crowd again. It's relying on the community. Okay. So it's kind of the 5-star review system that we're all familiar with on Amazon. You can leave a review. If there is something questionable or it may be copyrighted or whatever else, there are protocols put in place to flag things that then gets back in that ISKME will take and look through and verify for those purposes. But largely relying upon the community again.
Good. Well, that's what the community's for.
Yep, that's awesome. It's a great resource.
Yeah.
So one of the things I always like to ask everyone is, do you have any books that you recommend that have made an impact on you, either professionally or personally?
Oh, gosh. So many books. An impression on me professionally. I think of all of the books that we had as far as professional learning. Honestly, we did the daily 5 model whenever I taught in elementary school. And the sisters, I did some professional learning with them and I loved their model and I loved their approach. We also use Fontes and Pinnell for all of our guided reading. And so I could go to those, not necessarily transformational to my practice, but grounded a lot of the things that I did in my own classroom. And so then I think that obviously pays forward in a lot of the work that I do now. I brought 2 books that I'm currently reading. So my fun one, I'm really digging poetry recently. And I think it helps because of Instagram. I know that sounds weird, but I scroll through Instagram often. I don't want to know how often I actually do that, which lends itself to the second book, actually. But I scroll through Instagram and I follow a lot of poets on Instagram, and they are using that medium to now share their poetry, and I love it.
Wow.
And so there are some new poets that I have discovered through Instagram, but I love Ruby. I'm pretty sure I'm going to mispronounce her last name, but Kaur. And The Sun and Her Flowers is the one that I am reading. It's on my bedside table right now. And she's just, I got to see her live back in October when she came through DC, and she was amazing. Absolutely amazing. If you love spoken word, you should Google her and look at some of her YouTube videos. Cool. And then the other one, I'm working with ISTE right now on their digital leadership summit that's taking place in Santa Clara next weekend. And we were on the hunt for a keynote speaker, and I just threw this name out there because I said, there's no way that they would ever do this. And then they did. And then we got her. And now I get to introduce her, and I am freaking out.
So cool.
I have followed her podcast for a number of years, and I'm rereading Bored and Brilliant by Manoush Zomorodi. And that is, she had the podcast Note to Self. And because of all the work that they did on Note to Self, she and her executive producer, Jen Poyant, actually started their own company. And it's kind of the start of women in technology and their own kind of version of journalism, that they have started this new production company. And I think it's great. The whole idea behind Bored and Brilliant is that we are so addicted to our technologies, and that we don't allow ourselves to get bored. And when we allow ourselves to get bored, we actually have the ability to practice brilliance. And what that means, whether that's autobiographical planning, where we actually plan out not just the next week or the next month, but also goals for professional and personal purposes, but also creativity and thinking about things that we haven't, noticing things that we haven't necessarily seen. And so I'm rereading, about halfway through it again. The chapter that I'm on right now, I was just reading it on the plane home today, is all about how we just document everything with photos now. And I've noticed this recently as I live in DC and I can go to a Smithsonian museum anytime I want. But it's interesting how people now take in museums and art and history and artifacts when you go into a place. I have been very intentional to put my phone away whenever I go into a museum, because everyone is just sitting there snapping pictures, and we're not taking the time to actually take it in and receive it. And I really, really like that. And then the other one, the chapter that was right before that, was all about conversation. And they refer to Turkle's work, The Art of Conversation, her book. And I just think that that's so important, because we are losing the art of conversation. I have loved talking with both of you, and I know it's for a podcast, but I could do this anytime.
I know.
And so, when we rely strictly on texting or emailing and things like that, can we have a normal face-to-face conversation? And are we really losing that? And I just find that fascinating.
That's so awesome.
I'm going to download that book, because I feel the same way you do on technology and its impact just kind of on our family life. And, I have 3 kids, Brenda has a couple adult kids, and my sister just told me today, she said, we went to Olive Garden for dinner last night, and she said, there's an iPad on every table to encourage your kids to play games to keep them quiet while you're at the restaurant. And she said, we didn't let our kids play with them. We were the mean parents, because as they looked around the restaurant, the parents are in their phones, the kids are on these iPads, and no one's talking.
No one's talking.
And so my family, we have access to a lot of technology. We do things like I have the Circle, which is sponsored by Disney, and it shuts things down at certain times after certain time limits. It shuts down with no tears and no battles. So when it shuts down, and it's like, okay, now we need to go do something else. The imaginative play that happens at my house is phenomenal. The game, we have
Wow.
game nights all the time. We've bought all new games over the holidays, Christmas. We got a ton of new games, and
That's so
it's
fun.
just because I'm with you, you know, and I feel like we are losing a lot of this connectivity between people, and our kids,
Yeah.
my adult children, would rather just text their friends and
yeah.
take 3 hours
Yeah.
to decide where they're going to go and meet each other in the mall or whatever.
Then a 5-minute
Then
conversation.
I'm like, can you just call him?
I know.
Can you, like, is he picking you up or is she picking you up? Or are you guys meeting? Who's all going? Like, can somebody just make a phone call for gosh sakes? Like,
Yeah.
But not
Yeah.
only that, I mean, adults as well. We need our minds to shut down.
Mm-hmm.
And really, that's where all the creativity comes and solutions come into your brain after
know.
you let your mind
I know.
rest.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, my husband, very typically, I mean, because the shower is really the only place
I was just going to say the shower.
that you can get away from technology completely.
Yeah.
Generally, I mean, I know now
Yeah.
you can probably buy
Oh, yeah, there's shower
waterproof
things.
and
Yeah.
all that stuff, but he'll have mathematical equations written in on the glass,
On the
right?
glass,
Because
yeah.
he can finally, I figured out my problem, you know. You know,
Wow.
because you really need to have that. Your mind needs to be able to shut off, not just at sleep, but during the day as well.
It's interesting because I just started practicing yoga winter of last year, and I'm coming up on a full year, and I've practiced every single day. I have a travel mat. It has been to multiple countries, multiple states now, and it's the one time when I can get my brain to start to quiet down. It doesn't quiet down, to start
Yeah.
to
Right.
quiet down and be able to really think about it. I love consuming things in my in my earbuds
Oh, I
all the
do
time.
too.
And so whether it's music, I'm an avid music listener, or podcast or whatever else. And so part of the Bored and Brilliant book is actually, it stemmed from a challenge that they did on the Note to Self podcast, where it's 7 days and you get a new challenge every day. And one of the challenges is put your phone away whenever you are walking. And so when you are in motion, put your phone away. Do not have it in your hand, put it in a bag, like whatever. And so that's
That is hard. I don't know that. I was
Like-
just thinking, like, can I do that?
and not even listen to
Oh.
things. So she talks about her experience when she first got on the subway in New York, and she goes, I didn't have anything to listen to, and I printed out an article the day before, so I had something to read. And was just talking about, she was actually able to consume an entire article because she wasn't distracted by a phone or answering an email or whatever else. And I'm like, I really need to get back in this
Right.
habit. I need to get
Because
back
not
into
only
it.
that, you're typically, even if you're watching TV, you're not just even watching TV, right? You're on Facebook or
Oh,
you're on
no.
Instagram,
No, no.
right? Or you're
Oh,
answering
yeah.
texts. And, like, wow, you can't even do like one technology at a time. Now it's 2 or 3 things
Right.
at the same
But
time.
I'm seeing that happen in the kids too. Like they have to have the TV on while
Sure.
they're, playing a game on on the iPad, or even just it's kind of that their mind can't be quiet.
No,
like they
not
have
at
to
all.
have to
Yeah.
have that noise or that sound, and that worries
Yeah.
me a little bit. Of like
Sure.
what are the effects of that? Because I don't know that we've really ever seen that before.
Mm-hmm.
I guess maybe when television started and the parents were like, "Get off that TV!"
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
But even then, it's probably
Scrappy
3
kids.
hours a day, or that'd probably be the max because there really wasn't even anything on TV.
No, the statistics are getting pretty crazy. So I think that's good. That's a great book. I'm going to
Yeah.
add that to my list.
Yep.
And thank you for that.
Yeah.
And then we had, I think,
Oh,
one
and
other question.
Another one.
We always say that. One more
One
question.
more,
But this
one
is
more.
really, I think, the last one.
Do you happen to have, you travel the country all the time. You are always on the road. Do you have any technology failure stories that you could maybe share with us? Or maybe, just one. Go.
One.
Because
There are so many. I don't even know where to begin because, no one really likes a keynote without slides or a microphone,
Right. That's always fun.
which never
No.
happened. That's never happened. I think the one that I mentioned to you all, and I want to make sure that everyone knows, it's not to sound like super bougie by saying this, but I had the amazing honor and privilege to be in the White House a couple of times while I was at the U.S. Department of Ed. And when I say the White House, it wasn't really in the White House that you see on TV. It was over at the Eisenhower building right across, but it's right across the street, but it's like all in the same compounds. You have to go through the same security. Okay. So let me just start there. Anyway, it's where the vice president's office is. It's a really, really beautiful building. And we had one of our final events there in December of 2016. And we had breakout sessions, and I was leading one of the sessions, and we had intended to use Google Docs to capture everyone's thoughts and notes and everything else. And this lovely, lovely, beautiful building has terrible connectivity. And it was a big, big fat failure, where then we were then scrambling for any sort of chart paper and stickies and scratch paper where people could write things down, because we wanted to brainstorm as a unit in this breakout session, and we had no way of actually capturing people's thoughts and notes. So it was awesome. It was a scramble.
Markers.
It was a scramble. Cool. It's cool. I love analog. Don't get me wrong, but that's not what I was anticipating doing necessarily. So plan B.
Does anybody have a pen?
I have plan B in my back pocket. Let's go.
And I think that's, we hear that a lot. Teachers, you've got this you've planned for it.
Right.
Your principal's coming in to observe you this day.
You've tested it, everything.
You've tested it. The kids know how to log in, and that's the day the internet doesn't work.
The internet doesn't work. The tool that you're using updated last night.
That's happened to me. Yes. Yeah, I can't tell you. I think I blew a major conference presentation because literally the night I had set everything up. I went to bed. I woke up the next morning and everything had changed. Thank you, Google. And I was like, every single slide had a screenshot on it of what I was showing them, and it did not look anything like the live version that they were looking at on their devices. And I was like, I swear last night it looked like this. And they, what are they're thinking yeah, right. It looked like that.
Yeah. No, I promise.
I'm I think I was 9 months pregnant at the time. I was ready to cry. I was like, this isn't.
You're listen, I am bringing a child into this world. I would not lie to you. Come on.
I swear. I was never asked back to that conference to present. It's well.
I understand.
So we know, and this is not a question, this is allow you to have a statement. You are everywhere. We are going to see you at Spring Q, but you said, you were just flying in tonight. You're going to be in Santa Clara next weekend. What are some of the things you have coming up? And if people are in the area that they can maybe attend, or some of the exclusive things that they can attend?
Yeah, I will be at ISTE's Digital Leadership Summit this next weekend, which is I'm facilitating this whole thing with one of my best friends, Zach Chase. We used to work at the Office of Ed Tech together, and I'm super excited to be in a room full of district level leaders, system leaders, the decision makers as we work through problems of practice and we go through the design thinking process. So that's going to be a really cool event. I will be at the 5 Sigma conference in Denver, Colorado on February 22nd and 23rd. That puts me into March and Spring Q in Palm.
And that's 14 through 16
of March.
Yes. My presentation will be on Friday, March 15th, and it's towards the end of the day, but I promise it'll be worth it.
Definitely.
It will be.
So interestingly enough, that's not on OER, and I'm kind of excited. We're going to talk about media literacy and fake news, and I'm doing this presentation with Mark Ray, who helped lead Future Ready Librarians. And there's an expletive in the title, which is why we didn't think it would get it accepted, but it did.
Wow.
Don't worry. It was the different.
I did see that. That's so funny. I saw that. I was like, what is this? But I didn't catch that it was you. I think I just saw the title.
That's so funny. Yeah. Yeah, so that takes me through March. I don't know if you want me to keep going. I'm on the road, and then I'll be in Wisconsin, and then I'll be in Portland, Oregon, and April, who knows? It's kind of up in the air. I'm hoping to be back in San Diego. They're doing another Go Open Summit in San Diego on April 15th, and that puts me in May. Oh, QBold. I should actually give props to that. QBold, John Carripo would be very sad if I didn't. QBold will be in San Diego this year. It's that first weekend of May, 4-5. Yep. And it's a silly, stupid, amazing price to go to a really great conference. And they're doing some really great stuff. So it's actually going to be at one of the high schools in Carlsbad. And I know they're souped really well because they're doing some great stuff with OER in Carlsbad. Go figure. And then I get to fly either directly from there or stop at home really fast. And then I'm going to Portugal for the Creative Commons Summit where I will be speaking.
Wow.
And I'm super excited to go speak in Lisbon.
Wow.
Great.
Yeah.
Amazing. So do you have a website that like lists all your dates or?
I don't. That's interesting that you mentioned that. I don't actually.
You should do that.
I just post about them on my Instagram usually.
You should do that.
I should do that, or I can potentially add them to my project site. I should actually look into that.
Where you'll be, because I know you sent us the list, so they'll be on our website and in our show notes. But you might have fans that are and especially
after this episode.
This is an international podcast, so we can't guarantee that you won't have My Tech Toolbelt fans showing up in Portugal. But it could happen. But I think that if we wanted to hear you talk and you were going to be close enough that they could drive to get there.
Of course.
And especially since you're all over the country.
Yeah.
So there's opportunities for everyone.
All over the world,
She's all over the world.
Brenda.
I'm sorry. You are right. You are right.
She's internationally famous.
International. So home base is DC when I am here. But yes, home base is DC. And I will also put this out for any of your listeners too. Now that you all kind of have some foundational knowledge and whatever else, if you have follow-up questions, you are more than welcome to contact me. And I love connecting with teachers, whether that is through a phone call, an email, a Zoom, whatever. I am happy to answer questions. If you don't find the answers that you're looking for on that project site, let me know because I'd love to chat with you.
We have all of your contact information that'll be up on our website as well. So that way they can email you or Instagram you or Twitter you.
And she's very active on Instagram. I love that. I know. Posts every day. I love her pictures.
Every day.
I do.
So that's cool. I want to thank you for taking the time. I know you're kind of coming off a trip and it's just been you're always coming off of a trip, I think. So
I am.
But I love the conversation. I love the attitude. I just love the commitment that you have with this topic and with just life in general, the enthusiasm and the passion with which you're able to share with teachers your love, and that's just so contagious. And so thank you for doing that. Thank you for being an inspiration and an innovator and someone who really just gives back to the teaching community. And thanks for, again, taking the time today to just hang with us and spend some time with us. We've had a great time.
I know. It's been fantastic.
Yeah. I can't believe it's been 2 hours already since I joined. I was like, yeah, we can keep talking. Oh, wait, I should probably go to bed.
Oh, that's right.
It's right, yeah.
I have you gotta
be somewhere.
Well, thank you so much. Yeah. It's been fantastic.
I will see.
Thank you.
We'll see you at Spring Q for sure. If we don't see you before that, we'll definitely be in the front row of your session Friday afternoon. Because and I can't wait to meet fake news. I can't wait to hear about fake news.
Biggest fans.
Media literacy.
I know.
Kristina, go enjoy the rest of your evening, and we just thank you so much. Thanks for being a good friend.
Yes, thank you. I really appreciate it.
We're out.
Thanks for listening to the My Tech Toolbelt podcast. If you have enjoyed listening, please rate us on Apple Podcasts or send us some feedback on our website, mytechtoolbelt.com. We would love to hear from you. This will help us deliver the content that you want to hear. Thanks, and we're out.